He bought a house. His friend rented. 20 years later, who got richer? Meet Jake and Daniel. They're both 32 years old. They live in the same American city. They both make $80,000 a year, and after years of saving, skipping overpriced delivery fees, and pretending a homemade coffee tastes exactly like the $7 one downtown, they've both saved $80,000. Same age, same salary, same savings, but they're about to make two completely different decisions. Jake takes his $80,000 and buys a house. Daniel keeps renting and invests his money instead. For the next 20 years, we're going to follow every mortgage payment, rent increase, investment contribution, repair bill, and dollar of equity. And at age 52, one of them will be ahead. But probably not for the reason you think. Because this isn't really a story about buying versus renting. It's a story about what happens to your money after you make the choice. This is Monetary Cipher. Let's decode the numbers. Jake buys the American dream. Jake wants stability. He wants his own place, a backyard, a garage, and enough space to buy $4,000 worth of tools for projects he'll eventually watch somebody else complete on YouTube. After months of searching, Jake finds it. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, small backyard, garage. Price? $350,000. Jake puts down 20%, $70,000. That leaves a mortgage of $280,000. But there's something first-time buyers discover very quickly. The down payment isn't the only check you're writing. There are lender fees, title costs, inspections, prepaid expenses, and closing costs. For our example, we'll assume another $10,000 at closing. That means Jake's entire $80,000 savings is now committed to the purchase. He takes a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%. On $28,000, his monthly principal and interest payment is approximately $1,863. But wait, owning a $350,000 house doesn't cost $1,863 a month. That's just where the fun begins. We'll initially estimate property taxes, $350/month, homeowner's insurance, $150/month, maintenance reserve, about $292/month, add everything together, and Jake's starting housing cost is approximately $2,655 per month. And no, the maintenance reserve doesn't mean something breaks every month. It means eventually your house looks at your bank account and says, "You've had money for too long." Daniel chooses to rent. Daniel makes a completely different decision. He rents a comparable home nearby for $2,000 a month. His landlord handles major repairs. No property tax bill directly arriving in Daniel's mailbox. No $8,000 surprise because something under the house has suddenly decided water belongs inside. Most importantly, Daniel still has his $80,000. So he invests it in a diversified stock market index portfolio. For this illustration, we'll assume an average 8% annual return over the long run. That's an assumption, not a promise. Real markets don't return 8% every year. Some years are fantastic. Some years make you seriously reconsider every financial decision you've made since kindergarten. But we're building a long-term model. At the beginning, Daniel's housing costs are roughly $655 less per month than Jake's. And here's the rule that determines whether Daniel's strategy works. He has to invest that difference, not spend it. Not upgrade his car. Not discover that he suddenly needs business class flights. Invest it every month. But rent is throwing money away. And now somebody watching this is probably yelling, "Daniel is throwing $2,000 away every month." Fair argument. Rent doesn't build home equity. But here's the part people sometimes forget. Not every dollar Jake pays builds equity either. In Jake's first mortgage payment, roughly $1,633 goes to interest. Only about $230 goes toward principal. Then Jake also has property taxes, insurance, maintenance. Those costs don't magically become home equity. So saying, rent is throwing money away, while treating mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, and a broken HVAC system like investments isn't exactly fair accounting. Both men are paying for housing. They're simply paying for it differently. Jake is slowly acquiring an asset. Daniel is keeping his capital invested somewhere else. And that's where this gets interesting. 3 years later. Fast forward 3 years. Jake is now 35. After 36 mortgage payments, his mortgage balance has fallen from $280,000 to approximately $270,835. So he has paid down a little over $9,000 of principal. Not exactly a financial rocket ship, but his house has also appreciated. Let's assume 3.5% average annual appreciation for this illustration. The $350,000 house would now be worth approximately $388,000. Subtract the remaining mortgage, and Jake has around $117,000 in home equity. That's real wealth. Meanwhile, Daniel's investments have been working too. His original $80,000 has remained invested. He's also been investing the monthly savings from renting. Under our assumptions, after 3 years his investment account would be around $126,000. So who's winning? Daniel. Roughly $126,000 invested. Jake. Roughly $117,000 in home equity. Daniel is slightly ahead. But this race is nowhere near over. And Jake has discovered another benefit of homeownership. He can paint any wall any color he wants. He has also discovered the downside. If that wall starts leaking, it's his wall. Time changes the equation. Now something important begins happening. Daniel's rent doesn't stay at $2,000 forever. Assume rent rises about 3% per year. $2,000 becomes $2,060. Then $2,122. Then $2,185. And it keeps climbing. Jake has rising costs too. Property taxes can rise. Insurance can rise. Maintenance gets more expensive. But Jake has one enormous advantage. His principal and interest payment stays about $1,863 on this fixed-rate mortgage. That's one of the most powerful features of a fixed mortgage. Daniel's landlord can raise the rent. Jake's lender can't suddenly call him and say, "Great news, Jake. We renovated our corporate office. So your mortgage is now $400 more." The principal and interest portion is fixed. So the monthly cost gap starts shrinking. Daniel can still invest. But gradually, there's less difference to invest. Year 10. Now jump to year 10. Jake and Daniel are 42. Jake's $350,000 home, assuming 3.5% annual appreciation, would now be worth approximately $494,000. His remaining mortgage balance is approximately $240,000. That gives Jake about $253,000 in home equity. Think about that. He started with $80,000. 10 years later, he controls an asset worth nearly $500,000 and has roughly $250,000 of equity. But Daniel hasn't exactly been sleeping. His original $80,000 has been compounding. He's also been investing the monthly cost advantage whenever renting was cheaper. At our assumed 8% return, Daniel's portfolio is now approximately $265,000. Daniel is still slightly ahead, about $265,000 versus Jake's roughly $253,000. But look at what has happened to Daniel's rent. After those annual increases, it's now around $2,600 per month. And Jake's mortgage principal and interest? Still approximately $1,863. The race is getting tighter. The opportunity cost problem. This is where we have to talk about opportunity cost. When Jake spent $80,000 buying the house, that money stopped being available for the stock market. Daniel's $80,000 stayed invested. At an 8% average return, $80,000 left untouched for 20 years could grow to roughly $373,000. That's before considering additional contributions. This is the hidden cost people often ignore when comparing buying and renting. A down payment isn't free just because you still technically own the money as equity. That capital could have been doing something else. But Daniel has an opportunity cost too. He gave up leveraged exposure to a house. Jake controlled a $350,000 asset using $70,000 down. If that entire property appreciates, Jake benefits from appreciation on the whole house, not merely his original down payment. That's leverage. And leverage is powerful. Can make you wealthier. It can also make financial pain arrive significantly faster when things go wrong. Year 20. The reveal. Now let's jump to year 20. Jake and Daniel are 52. 20 years have passed. Jake's original $350,000 home, at our assumed 3.5% annual appreciation, would be worth approximately $696,000. His mortgage balance has fallen to approximately $160,000. That leaves him with around $536,000 in home equity. Daniel? His investments have compounded for 2 decades. His original $80,000 grew. His additional investments grew. And under our assumptions, his portfolio ends up around $590,000. So Daniel wins, right? Technically, under this particular set of assumptions, yes. But only by around $50,000 before considering taxes, transaction costs, or other individual circumstances. And here's where the story gets interesting. Change the assumptions slightly, and Jake can win. If the house appreciates closer to 4% instead of 3.5%, the result changes significantly. If stock market returns are lower, Jake gains ground. If Daniel's rent rises faster, Jake gains ground. If Jake faces huge repairs, Daniel gains ground. If Daniel earns stronger investment returns, Daniel pulls away. There isn't one universal winner. There are millions of possible versions of this spreadsheet. And every American city can produce a different answer. The problem with Daniel's perfect plan. There's another problem. Daniel's spreadsheet assumes Daniel behaves like a spreadsheet. Every month he saves money by renting. He invests it. Market crashes? Invest. Recession? Invest. Headlines screaming that Wall Street is collapsing? Invest. His friend buys a new Ford F-150 and Daniel suddenly starts questioning whether he also deserves one? Still invest. That's difficult. Because the greatest threat to the rent and invest the difference strategy may not be the stock market. It may be the renter. That $500 earmarked for investing can very easily become car payment, a vacation, a new phone, restaurants, subscriptions, or 25 separate Amazon purchases that somehow all felt essential at the time. Jake doesn't have the same choice with his mortgage principal. Every mortgage payment forces some money toward equity. In that sense, a mortgage can act like forced saving. But homeownership has its own traps. But don't crown Jake either. His house comes with risks. First, maintenance. Roofs don't care about your emergency fund. HVAC systems have an incredible ability to detect when you've just booked a vacation. Second, liquidity. Daniel can sell $20,000 of investments if he needs access to cash. Jake can't sell 3% of his kitchen. To access home equity, he generally needs to sell, refinance, or borrow against the property. Third, concentration. Daniel can own pieces of hundreds or thousands of companies through diversified funds. Jake owns one house, on one street, in one neighborhood, in one city. If that area booms, fantastic. If the local economy struggles, Jake can't diversify by selling the upstairs bathroom. So should you buy or rent? Here's a better way to think about it. Buying becomes more attractive when you're likely to remain in the home for many years. You can comfortably afford the total cost of ownership, you value stability, and the purchase price makes sense relative to comparable rent. Renting becomes more attractive when flexibility matters. Buying is dramatically more expensive than renting. You may move relatively soon, or you can invest the capital you would otherwise put into the property. And that's the critical part. If you rent, actually invest. Because renting and investing the difference can be a powerful strategy. Likewise, buying a house you can comfortably afford can build significant wealth. Buying the biggest house a lender will approve because Zillow photos gave you emotional damage is also a completely different strategy. 20 years later, Jake didn't become wealthy simply because he bought a house. Daniel didn't become wealthy simply because he rented. Jake benefited from appreciation, leverage, mortgage paydown, and time. Daniel benefited from liquidity, compounding, and disciplined investing. The real winner wasn't determined on the day they signed the lease or mortgage. It was determined by what they did for the next 20 years. So tell me in the comments, would you rather own a $700,000 house or have nearly $600,000 invested and keep renting? And if you're trying to wait until home prices and mortgage rates both collapse at exactly the same time, I respect the optimism. Subscribe to Monetary Cipher. Decode money. Build wealth. This video is for educational and illustrative purposes only. Actual investment returns, home appreciation, mortgage rates, taxes, insurance, maintenance, rent increases, and transaction costs vary significantly. Past investment performance does not guarantee future results.